Hello, and thank you for taking the time to watch our video. Today we'll be discussing Major League Baseball's attempt to globalize not only their corporation, but the sport of baseball. We'll be focusing on the MLB's current globalization strategies, many of which have been highlighted by the implementation of the World Baseball Classic. Our group includes myself, Dave Wolfmeyer, Brandon Byers, Drew Hoffey, Paritosh Katyal, and Zhou-Wen Wang. We hope you enjoy our presentation. Thank you. During our presentation, we wanted to provide a unique global and cultural view on Major League Baseball and some of the successes and difficulties they have had in implementing their globalization strategy. Drew will be discussing the overall Major League Baseball globalization strategy, as well as providing an analysis of the current strategies in Europe. Brandon will be focusing on the MLB's strategy in China and providing an analysis of the World Baseball Classic itself. Paritosh will then provide a comparison of Major League Baseball versus the global expansion of a similar game of cricket. Zhou-Wen will then give an overview of an analysis of the Major League Baseball strategy versus the National Basketball Association strategy when they went global. Finally, we will provide some key takeaways from our analysis of the strategy case titled Taking the Ball Game Out of the World, an analysis of the World Baseball Classic as a global branding promotional strategy for Major League Baseball, written by Benjamin D. Goss, a management professor at Missouri State University.
Major League Baseball is looking to expand its operations globally for many of the same reasons that most companies are looking to. Due to increases in technology, the ability for them to share their product around the world is easier. With this in mind, Major League Baseball wants to share their sport across boundaries through TV, radio, internet, in order to acquire new talent and improve licensing opportunities. Likewise, this gives them the opportunity to showcase their sport as well as increase international participation throughout the world. Major League Baseball has tried expanding internationally in the past, but with limited success. This is largely due to their strategy being based upon hosting only temporary clinics and sending coaches and players to other countries to try to find talent and then bring them back to the U.S. The new strategy, focused mainly on the World Baseball Classic, which we'll discuss in more detail later, is more holistic and looks more at consumer needs, communicating brand identity, as well as developing metrics which can in future be used to optimize their strategies. This new strategy is focused more towards China, South Africa, and Europe. So looking to Europe now, there's both a lot of possibility as well as a lot of challenges based upon the very idea that Europe is a continent with a large variety of cultures from a large variety of nations. Now this provides opportunity because you can build off of these national identities and kind of the national spirit associated with sports to build rivalries, which is really an important part of baseball and sports and entertainment in general. But obviously this leads to some challenges as well because just because of language barriers, because of culture barriers, because of values, which goes back to kind of the strategy mix that we discussed before, where Major League Baseball needs to be fairly deliberate in their approach to each nation rather than just Europe writ large. But on the positive side of things, Europe is relatively small geographic compared to a place the size of all of Asia, or even America for that matter. And then they do have a fair amount of disposable income which can be spent on entertainment and merchandising. So there's lots of opportunity here that Major League Baseball can capitalize upon. Looking towards Major League Baseball's entry into the European market, we see several strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that enable Major League Baseball to capitalize upon these opportunities. First off, the league has a strong heritage that leads to a strong brand awareness overseas. This is kind of associated with the fashion industry, where people who may not understand the sport still enjoy wearing the clothes. Kind of on the flip side of that, this is also a weakness because there's a value closely associated with America, so adapting this to draw a French or German identity is a significant challenge. Another obvious threat to entry into the European market is the predominance of soccer as the form of sports entertainment in the area. And this would be very difficult to overcome, especially since soccer is a year-round sport there. However, as discussed in the past, based upon the geography, there are a lot of opportunities to capitalize upon national identities and national rivalries that are not available elsewhere.
The globalization into China focused more on developing talent in China and using them as marketing tools to expand globally. Things that were noticed: Chinese markets were highly influenced by these recognizable players. These influences led to partnerships in China, and those partnerships led to the development of sponsorships and advertising in those areas. Some notable examples are pictured on the right. The NBA used Yao Ming to capture the large Chinese market. Asian sponsorships increased from 20% before the office opening to 60% in 2006 due to long-term sponsorships being promoted. And for the Chicago Cubs, they had Japanese outfielder Kosuke Fukudome. There was a partnership between Japan's Nippon Life Insurance Company that included in-stadium signage, tickets, special events, and media backdrop signage for Fukudome's interviews. The World Baseball Classic, or better known as WBC, had a corporate goal of enhancing internationalization of the sport, as well as creating interest in the sport where it did not exist in certain nations. The WBC was started on March 3rd and ended March 20th in 2006. It staged 39 games in 7 international venues over 18 days. Was broadcasted in 9 languages and was covered by over 5,000 media members. The results were quite well for the WBC. It estimated 10 to 15 million past the cost of 45 to 50 million. The television ratings were quite solid in the U.S. and especially soared in Asian and Latin American nations, where the MLB had a pretty large market share in comparison to other sports, American sports that is. And it had a 36% share in Japan, especially for the semifinal game between Japan versus Korea. These were quite great results, but one thing that was noticed is that beyond 1 or 2 games, it did lack that local connection. The WBC had a 4-step strategy. Those 4 steps were identifying the consumer needs, communicating the brand identity, tracking global brand identity, and then determining the brand decisions. Now, for one, identifying the consumer needs. They wanted to identify the consumer needs worldwide and determine how it can brand itself in those different entities. This was done by functional and emotional benefits. The functional benefits were hard to identify because baseball is not a commodity-driven product. And for the emotional benefits, it would be captured by the media and then absorbed from consumers through that entity. For 2, communicating the brand identity. They had to establish a process as how they would communicate that brand identity to those consumers. So one strategy that they did use was they advertised to both small markets and big markets. The third was tracking the global brand identity. They had to establish a method as to how they would track this global identity and the success of their brand, and also monitor their customers' opinions. This traction was done through metrics such as average viewers, building capacity, ticket sales, and social media. 4, determining the brand decisions. The MLB focused more on a top-down approach. For example, for marketing and advertising, they decided to market to countries rather than by continent or region. Now let's move to the WBC cage analysis. For culture, there was strong nationalism between competing countries. For example, Korea versus Japan had a high market share, basically because the nationalism between these competing countries and also the competitive nature that bred from this event. The language barrier. This is an obvious barrier as different languages, as stated before, they had to implement 9 different languages for different areas in different parts of the world, partnering with local companies to build brand awareness. This was primarily for advertising and marketable reasons, and then the brand perception as an American sport. For administrative, it focused more on a top-down approach in marketing. They targeted marketing to individual countries rather than by continent or region. This was a relatively old strategy to go about doing things. And then also the lack of knowledge regarding social issues in each region. And the MLB should maybe have directly addressed problems linked to their industries in these different regions. For the geographical aspect, there were obvious time zone differences for consumers watching in different countries, so it would make it hard for certain consumers to chime in on certain events. And then the geographic size and the low slash high marketable consumers. This is primarily dealing with how many consumers are in that area. And if there were low slash high consumers, primarily low, it would be hard to market to those consumers and bring baseball to that area. And then economic. They had to target advertising to low markets and then infrastructure to facilitate transportation of consumers to staged events. This was particularly hard because infrastructure in certain areas might be lackluster or lukewarm.
When talking about MLB's strategy in China, we cannot overlook the NBA's development and experience in China. Now, look at the cage analysis of China. We can find that America and China still have many huge distances. They have different cultural distance, they speak different language, different religions, and they have different political NBA team owned by individuals or companies, but CBA team owned by local government and companies. And China also have different consumer incomes. They have large income gap in China. Based on this distance, we can do a SWOT analysis of NBA in China to find NBA's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The strength is obvious. The NBA is the first level of basketball match in the world. It has so many big stars, such as Air Jordan, Magic Johnson, and Yao Ming. The weakness is that Chinese sports are highly administrative, and Chinese basketball players in NBA are too few. But it still have huge opportunities in China. There have 109 million basketball population in 2009, and China's own basketball league CBA developed not very well. The stress is still the cultural difference and the policy limitations. NBA in China need to get the government audit and approval. Although there have many huge distance, weakness and threats, NBA developed very well in China. In 1987, the NBA officials offered for NBA videos to the CCTV for free, and the CCTV for the first time played the NBA All-Star game in China, which resulted in a huge positive impact on Chinese people. In 2002, Yao Ming as the first foreign draft pick to join the NBA, and in 2009, the NBA revenue in China is about 15 million US dollar, which is the NBA's largest overseas income. And in 2009, the Chinese market harvested its amazing of 150 million. The number of basketball lovers is also more than 109 million. NBA entered in Chinese market but obtained big success. If MLB want to enter China, it should learn some experience from NBA. First strategy is to introduce Chinese players to MLB. It can find superstars in baseball such as Yao Ming in basketball. Second strategy is to strengthen cooperation with the Chinese sports management department. And the third is increasing the broadcast of MLB in China. And the last is increasing promoting strategy. For example, it can appointment celebrity as China's MLB ambassador to promoting baseball in China.
Let us compare baseball to a sport that is eerily similar to it. Both are bat and ball sports, played to score runs, although cricket is generally considered as the complicated sibling because of its multiple formats. Cricket, originated in Britain, is also considered a religion in India, much like baseball is considered as the national pastime of the US. Unlike cricket, baseball is hugely dependent for its revenue on its domestic leagues, especially in the United States, while cricket's revenues are derived from international rivalries. Baseball is catching up with its forays in South America and China in recent years, and in fact, the Major League Baseball is using the World Baseball Classic revenue to fund national baseball federations. If we compare cricket's global reach, it is limited to the British Commonwealth, with only India and Australia generating revenues and sustaining popularity of the sport. A cage analysis shows a highly skewed strategy towards administrative ties, while a complete ignorance of cultural and geographic distances. Powerful member states like India, Australia, and England have used their economic hegemony over other member nations, which has stopped cricket's global expansion. The recent corruption and spot fixing scandals have also mired cricket's reputation as a clean sport, while baseball's image remains relatively clean. Even compared to FIFA, which is grappling with its own corruption issues before the 2018 Qatar World Cup for soccer. There are certain lessons that can be exchanged between these two sports of cricket and baseball. There is a lot that baseball can learn from cricket's globalization strategy over the last decade and its pitfalls. Cricket tried to venture into China and Middle East, was somewhat successful in coming to the US and Canada because of the Indian diaspora, but its prioritization of commercialization over game development has stalled its rise. Cricket has also doubled down over the use of its T20 format, which is a 3-hour game that is hugely popular with international audiences, unlike its other formats which are longer and considered only for purists. Baseball can learn a lot from cricket's approach over this in the last decade. Baseball, unlike cricket, was successful in using adaptation and rapid aggregation in China from the AAA framework. It identified the key trends and adapted to local needs. Co-opting Chinese and Indian players in the Major League Baseball also legitimized baseball's claim over a globalized sport and helped bridge the cultural distance between the US and other countries. Last but not the least, baseball is also aided by other avenues. A famous movie called Million Dollar Arm, based on two Indian protagonists, helped popularize the sport of baseball in India. It can be said that despite their differences, if baseball learns its lessons well, the chances that baseball will infiltrate cricket's strongholds are higher as compared to the corollary.
To wrap things up, we wanted to review some of our key takeaways on what Major League Baseball needs to do in order to achieve global success. First, during the World Baseball Classic, they must customize their broadcast product to each region and make sure that games are being broadcast in the correct languages to help diminish the language distance. Second, baseball must obtain local ambassadors, preferably superstar baseball players from these countries, to help promote the game, similar to what Yao Ming did for the NBA. Third, they must develop metrics on how to measure their success, catered to each region. Fourth, with growing nationalistic trends in the world, Major League Baseball must capitalize on domestic value of baseball in supporting a specific nation, similar to the FIFA World Cup. Additionally, Major League Baseball can tie their apparel into fashion trends and help their product be seen by customizing the apparel to each region. Finally, the MLB must be patient because this will take significant time and investment. because they are growing a sport and fandom in brand new areas. Thank you for taking the time to watch our presentation, and we appreciate any feedback.